Hi, everyone. Welcome to 30 Minutes with Spyglass Lending. It's been a few weeks since we've been here. Good to be back. And today we have an amazing guest for the big return. Seth Phillips, Mr. ADU himself of ADU Gold. This is the guy. This is the expert here in California who's going to tell us all what is going on with ADUs. Well, what is an ADU? That is an accessory dwelling unit. They've been all the rage now for a couple of years, but everybody loves to talk about them. No one has any idea what to do with them except Mr. Seth Phillips. Seth, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity. This is now my calling in life. Is I'm spreading the word of ADUs and now SB9, and it's really exciting.
The gospel is out. You've got the moniker Mr. ADU. How did you earn the moniker, by the way?
Well, that's a good question. But I remember when I started first hearing about the Mr. thing, a broker that I worked with decided he was going to be Mr. Sherman Oaks, and it worked. I mean, he completely dominated the thing, and everywhere he would go, people would call him that, not his real name. And I just watched that happen, and I thought, this is so corny, but it works. So this was just my opportunity to be a Mr. something before anybody else, and I'm glad I did.
Well done taking it. Snatch it when you get it. So, having that moniker, being Mr. ADU, and having your company ADU Gold, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what you do? What is it exactly that you focus on?
Great. Well, I'm originally from Minnesota. You betcha. You can still hear a little bit of that in my voice, but I've lived in Los Angeles for 37 years now, and I've been a broker agent, real estate, for 33 years here. So I've got a really good, excellent real estate background. I don't really do much in the way of retail real estate business anymore. But when the market collapsed in 2008, I went from having a very good paying job to being unemployed almost overnight. So I was looking around what I could do during that time, and I started to go into the house flipping business with a partner. And we were initially selling, buying houses on the courthouse steps that were typically in South Los Angeles, and we were buying them for $120,000. We were flipping them for $160,000 to $180,000. There wasn't a lot of margin in there, but one thing that was true was there was almost unlimited inventory, unfortunately. And so I learned a lot during that process of, the house flipping business, what to look for, how to fix them up, figuring all that stuff out. And then as we got that figured out, then we realized that because those margins were so small, that the only way to make any real money at it to scale it up was to do a lot of projects at the same time. So we had to learn another skill set of not only individually, but then managing multiple construction projects simultaneously. So that was all
big.
good.
If you don't mind, I want to pause there for a second, because that's so big for real estate investors, right? I mean, it's one thing to do the one-off and to make what you can out of that, but really when you put in and you turn it into a volume business, even on the smaller margins, that's what everybody's looking for.
Yeah. I mean, it's the only way, because, you've got partners and you've got all these people, everybody is getting paid, but you as running the project, when on a deal that size, when it's all said and done, you're maybe looking at maybe $15,000 or something like that, which is great. But obviously, considering, the time and effort involved in that, you got to do it at scale to be able to make money. So we figured that out, I think, pretty effectively. And then as the market began to heal, we just started moving up the food chain and doing properties in more and more expensive neighborhoods, till we got all the way to the top, where we were doing ground up new luxury construction in Beverly Hills, Hollywood Hills, Bel Air. And that was yet another level of education, because those projects are so complicated that from the time you start to the time you can just take it to market is like 2 years. And a lot can go wrong in 2 years. So although we were successful in that market, one thing everybody understands in real estate is things move in cycles. Sometimes it's going up, but sometimes it's going down. And, obviously trying to be aware of that is very important. So we had already been in an upward appreciating market for quite some time. So I was just starting to get more concerned about that. So my story into ADU started right there, because my partner and I decided to kind of do the same thing we've been doing, but to scale it back a little bit into a safer price range, something in the $2 million range instead of $10 million range.
Yeah, you would work. That's a big thing. I mean, if you don't mind, just give us a quick time frame of that. So really 2008, or call it 2009, you started with just $150,000 properties, courthouse steps,
right,
all the way up to $10 million properties. How long did it take you to get there? What was it was only about 5 or 6 years, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because once we hit that bottom in the market, it actually did recover pretty quickly. I mean, when you look at that from a historical perspective,
Sure.
It really surprised a lot of people. So that was good. But now we decided to dial it back. So we found a probate property in Culver City, and we purchased that for $735,000 with the intention of doing what we had been doing, which was just to knock it down, because it was basically a tear down house, and then just building the biggest 2-story modern box on it, but something more modest, as I said. So we bought it. We hired the architect. We just finished the plans, actually, when I first heard about this ADU thing. And I remember this moment, and I will always remember this moment, because something about that, my partner that I was working with at the time told me about it, just struck me so hard. I remember we were driving in a car, driving up to Santa Barbara area to look at some other properties. I remember what I was looking at outside of the car. I remember the dashboard. I remember everything. It was so profound. So I immediately deep dived into it, really researched it. And the more I looked at it, the more I just came to believe this was going to be the future of real estate. And so we completely switched gears. Instead of knocking the house down, we just completely remodeled it, and then built in the backyard the first 2-story luxury ADU with rooftop deck in the city of Los Angeles. And Aaron knows all about this because he did the financing on that project.
I definitely did. I remember it well. I remember switching midstream, as you discussed. I mean, like, we first talked about what we were doing, and
right.
It's a lot easier from a hard money, private money perspective to give you the loan based on keeping it SFR or turning it into a duplex and knowing what those comps are. But doing it, as you said, and turning it into ADU without those comps, very, very difficult to make that switch and give that type of financing, because you're taking that huge leap of faith. As you just said, you were the first to do a luxury second unit like you did in the entire city. That was amazing. It was such a cool thing to be a part of. But please continue the story and tell us how you did on it.
So we built it, and then right as we were finishing it, this, I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but now I had to switch hat from being developer to being real estate agent, because I was going to be the agent that sold it. And as soon as I did that, I realized I had to develop a whole new language to sell this, because this was a brand new product that never had existed before. So there's so much things different about it from just a standard single family home or even multifamily stuff out there. It's this hybrid between them. So I decided that I would form a meetup group, and it's called ADU Development. And I'd never had run a meetup group before. And within 7 days, I had 100 people sign up. So I went, whoa, there's people that are like thirsty for this knowledge right now. And so every weekend on Saturday and Sunday, I would hold the traditional open house. But before those open houses, I would have a meetup group every Saturday and Sunday. So over the course of me marketing this property, I got an opportunity to probably run 1,000 plus people through this property. And I did that because I wanted to hear the questions and the thoughts from the people that were buyers for this kind of product, to really understand how the public was going to react to this product. And it was a really amazing experience.
No, that's incredible. Yeah, and you did very well on selling on the back end. But tell us a little bit about ultimately the appraisal process on the back end, because again, ultimately when you sold it, as you said, it was a hybrid. So the appraiser went out there to the end buyer and really couldn't use duplex comps, right? They had to kind of set a new part of the market in what the valuation was.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most asked questions that I have about ADUs, and it's the simplest one. How much value does an ADU actually add to a property? Now, when the dust all settles, I am 100% confident of this very simple look at it. Whatever your single family home is worth per square foot in that location is exactly what the ADU should add per square foot in that location. That said, I mean, that totally obviously makes sense, but because this is once again a brand new product, it's very, very really hard to predict. And unfortunately, this is the way it works. An appraiser actually has a very simple job. They get a new assignment. They got a property. They draw a circle half mile around it. They find all the comparable properties in there. They even it out for plus minus these little differences they have. Boom, they've got their value. It's very simple. However, when they go in to appraise a property with an ADU, the chances of there being another property that has an ADU within that proximity was very low. It's getting better now because there's so many more of them, but still, that's a challenge. So if there are no properties with ADUs to do, what happens? Well, this is where it gets dangerous, because now the appraiser has to think. This is
you never want an appraiser to think too much.
No, because unfortunately, since the market collapsed, there's so much pressure now and regulatory things in place in terms of appraisals, and for good reason, obviously, because it totally got abused, which is why we had that huge, one of the main reasons we had that huge market collapse. So they're basically incentivized to be very conservative, because they can't ever get in trouble for coming in too low. There's people that might not like it, but they're not going to get in trouble. But right. On the other side of that, if they come in too high, they can actually get in big time trouble for that. So the whole incentive is for them to be conservative. And this project is like maybe one of the most ultimate examples of that, because the appraiser that we brought out for the financing through you came in, and his appraisal came in exactly at the number that basically we ultimately sold for, which was exactly the number that I had predicted that it would sell for when I was penciling it out in the beginning. However, when we got our buyer in for the property, he came in and we had it listed at $1.8 million. We sold it for $1,805,000. And when the appraiser came out, they appraised it at $1.6 million. So, I mean, it was huge difference. Now, fortunately, he was putting down so much money that the bank was fine. They were still well within their margins. But, that was the real true test, because the buyer had to move forward buying a property that, according to the appraisal, was worth $200,000 less than what he had just agreed to pay for it. And much to our happiness, he didn't even come back and try to renegotiate the deal, because he understood exactly what that property represented to him as a buyer, because he could have said no to it and walked away. He was within his financial contingency, but that's exactly the kind of property that he wanted to buy. He wanted something that he could live in, that was beautiful, and he could rent out another part of it to help pay for that property. And the only way you really get that in that way is in this exact same kind of a setup. So he stuck with us and went through, and big surprise, he moved into the ADU because it's just spectacular, and rented out the front house. And he rented the front house for $4,500 a month. I had projected that.
Tell us again, what was the year at that time?
Huh?
What year was that again?
That was in the beginning of 2019.
Yeah.
So I predicted and projected that the back unit would rent for $5,500 a month, even though it was technically almost identical in size, but it was just so spectacular, and with the rooftop deck and everything. So he moved out of the property, I think about 2.5, 3 years later. And then he did, in fact, and now continues to rent out the ADU for $5,500 a month and the front house for $4,500 a month. So financially, that project just made sense for everybody in every way.
No doubt. And I'm sure if he, and it sounds like he does, still owns it, the difference between the 1.6 and the 1.8 back then, he's very happy with that now, because it's certainly well into the twos on value.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
he's
according to Redfin, which keeps sending me like I'm the owner of it, which is cool. Right. And it tells me it's 2.6 now. So
think about that. Yeah, I'm sure he is thrilled. And interestingly enough, going back to the appraisal of it.
Audio.
So one more time. Going back to the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's me. Oops. Okay. All right.
Talking about the appraisal, and going back to how the appraisers have to do this. And okay, that particular appraiser came out at 1.6, valued really 1.8 and all of that. But interestingly enough, the appraisers on the back end, because as you said, there are more now, but still not enough ADUs within a mile, because appraisers use within a mile comps. They're allowed to go outside of a mile now to find another ADU to put in their appraisal to help substantiate those values. And it seems to be that they should, because, these ADUs really are adding the value that everybody expects, right? Even if it's not creating a duplex or triplex or even fourplex. But let's talk a little bit about that for 1 second, because you had mentioned SB9, and I think a lot of people really want to know, some of the rules and regulations. It is about, having one single family home and putting an ADU on there, or putting an ADU and adding a JADU, a junior ADU, or this notion of multifamily ADUs, or specifically what's going on with SB9. So let's let you run with that for a little bit and break it down for us, please.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, which we knew, because it was a brand new product, it's been a learning curve for every parts of it, the financing, the appraisals, the public knowledge of it. It's growing, but it is getting a little bit more established. And by the way, there's over 20,000 ADU permits that have been pulled in the city of Los Angeles. I don't know the percentage of them that has already been completed, but it's a lot. And
by the way, since when? Do we know since when the 20,000? Since
it went into effect? Yeah.
Wow, tremendous. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually accomplishing the overall goal of this whole thing, which is to create more housing. And that's actually starting to hit a kind of a number where that actually, it could be making a small dent in our housing crisis, which is great, which is what really helps to motivate me every day. Because, there's one thing when you talk about a housing crisis and a lot of people go, really? Is there really a housing shortage? Well, one of the most obvious things that you can do to substantiate that is drive anywhere in the city of Los Angeles, and under almost every freeway overpass is a homeless encampment. What's the number one cause for homelessness? The cost of housing. the cost of housing just keeps going up, 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 up here in California. And because our supply and demand formula is just out of whack. So it absolutely has to be done. So based on the success of the ADU program, the state looked at that. They added the multifamily element into it in 2018. So now you can also do that with multifamily buildings. And you can add a lot more of those ADUs, which is now probably 85% of our business with ADUs is in the multifamily thing. But then they also went even further with this SB9, and you'll probably be the first anybody out there to hear this, because this is a nuance to the SB9 that is specific to the city of Los Angeles. And under the basic SB9 rule is that any single family, and that's important, at this point it only applies to single family properties, but ADUs did initially, and then a couple years later, based on the success, they expanded it. Maybe that'll happen with SB9, maybe not. But for right now, single family only. But single family lots now, and anywhere basically in the state of California virtually, can subdivide their single family lot into two separate legal parcels. And on each one of those parcels, they can have 2 units. So now you can have 4 units where there was just a single family house on a single family lot before. No zoning has changed. It's still R1, but they've changed the use of it. And that obviously is a huge, huge difference all by itself.
A huge difference. So let's give an example if we can. I mean, let's say somebody's got a 12,000 on R1, right? Zoned residential 1, so that usually signifies just one single family home. Call it a 12,000 square foot lot. You've got a 2,500 square foot house and a 12,000 square foot lot. You're saying easily now you can parse off a portion of that 12,500, build another unit on what was existing on the first parcel, right? And then the new parcel that was created. I mean, let's say you just split that in half, so you got 6,250 on each one. And on the original 6,250, you got a 2,500 square foot house, and you can put another ADU there. And then on the new parcel of 6,250, you can put 2 units on there.
Correct. Exactly. And they did leave a lot of leeway with the individual municipalities, the cities or whatever, to kind of dictate some of the parameters of that. But regardless, and they took a lot of the ADU law into SB9. So regardless of any floor area ratios, open space, or any of that stuff, in either ADU or an SB9, they have to allow you to build a minimum of 800 square foot units, but potentially up to unlimited. So that there's that. They also brought in the same thing in regards to parking. That's true of ADUs, and that is if your property is within 1/2 mile of mass transit, which includes a bus stop, then there is no parking requirement. And that is also true of SB9. They also brought in the setback requirements from ADU, which is 4 feet side and back, and that also applies to SB9. And the division part of it is really interesting because people go, is there like a minimum lot size? There is. But this is just like just silly almost that they even put this in there. If you subdivide your property into 2, each subdivided lot must be a minimum of 1,200 square feet. So that means you could literally subdivide a 2,400 square foot lot into 2 separate legal lots. And on each one of those lots, you could put 2 units. Wow. Now, physically fitting that on there, that might be a little bit more challenging.
That's a challenge, but still, I mean, that's, you talk about density. They're really turning LA into a city with that. If you're building up or you're putting that amount of units on that small amount of lots of footage, very different look and feel to LA if enough people, and you said 20,000 permits have now been pulled since this has gone through.
Yes. Yeah. On the ADU side. So
how long does it take to stamp, by the way, over at LADBS? How long until, start to finish it, somebody puts in the architecture and engineering and is actually able to build?
Well, under the ADU part, unfortunately, the COVID thing just slowed everything down in the city bureaucracy. Big surprise, because they sent everybody home. So when we very first started, we were able to get a typical ADU permit in about 3 months. And then once COVID hit, it added another 2 months onto that process.
Mhm.
And then it just also seemed to slow down even more. So unfortunately, it was typically taking us somewhere between, on the fast side, 5 months to maybe even 8 months just to get the permit. Now they've brought the guys back, and so it's starting to speed up again. And they put in some more electronic submittal processes that we can utilize now. So for a standard construction new ADU, I think I can realistically say now that the permitting process should be somewhere between 3 to 5 months. If you're just doing a simple garage conversion with no expansion to it whatsoever, that we can do in 2 months. So it is getting faster. Construction time hasn't really changed too much, other than you have to make sure that you're working with a good contractor that is aware of all the most likely supply chain constraints that everybody has to deal with. They just have to order stuff way further in front than they normally did before. Before, when you wanted windows, okay, it's time for the windows. You went to the store and picked them up the same day, and boom, no more. No, some of those things you have to order 3-4 months out in advance now.
Yeah, really, really need to plan now and know what you're getting into for sure. Well, let's talk very quickly. I want to mention something about the financing of this, that it's important for everybody to understand on the back end. It's one thing to finance the project itself, right? I mean, that's, hey, I love doing that stuff. It's what you and I did the first time around for your very first project, the hard money, real estate investors. Yes, there's always money for that, depending on the experience of the investor and the leverage they're willing to come in themselves. But it's the back end that's important, meaning once the project is done, what are you getting financed? And for anybody listening out there, please understand that right now, sanctioned by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, whether it's a conventional loan or what's known as a DSCR loan, where you're just getting the loan based on the the cash flow out of it, and you don't have to show financials personally, you're just doing the cash flow. They're still saying that you're allowed one single family and one ADU on a parcel. That's it. That's what should be financed. You cannot have anything on top of that, because a lot of people say, well, I'm going to do an ADU and then a JDU or junior ADU with it. Guess what? You're not going to get that financed on the back end, whether that's DSCR or conventional, or others are allowing, because again, part of these rules, and you'll talk about it, are they're allowing multifamily. You can have 2, 3, or 4 ADUs on the parcel if you have enough space and all of that, but you're going to have trouble financing that on the back end unless you make them multifamily, and that is possible. I have seen people doing the ADUs and putting separate meters on there and then getting them rezoned with title as duplex triplex. Sorry, not rezoned, but reissued as duplex triplex. Then you can get the financing on the back end. So that's important to know. But bring us up to speed. Exactly, I want to ask 2 questions. One, how many ADUs are allowed on one parcel, especially between single family and multifamily? And then tell us a little bit more about ADU Gold and exactly what you do for everyone.
Well, there's some important nuances in here, and this is evolving still. Under the original ADU laws, you're on a single family property, you're allowed one new detached ADU. And in addition to that, now you're also allowed a second ADU called a junior ADU, which has to be the conversion of the original principal residence, but that could also include a garage. Mm-hmm. So what's kind of funny about that is that you actually could, for instance, add a family room to a single family home and then convert that into a junior ADU after the fact. But there is one thing that was in the original law that's still there, is that if you have a regular ADU, there is no owner occupancy requirement. But if you have a junior ADU, then that does require the owner to occupy one of the units. And it's not only that owner, but it actually goes onto the deed as a deed restriction. So it's every future owner of that property too.
That's important to know. I appreciate you bringing that up. That's very important. And quickly, only because we're pressed for time, tell us real quickly about multifamily and how many ADUs you could do, and then tell us about ADU Gold, and then we've got to go.
Cool. Well, multifamily ADU allows any multifamily property to add 2 new detached ADUs. And then in addition to that, and this depends on the community, is that they can convert up to 25%, create 25% new units based on the existing unit count. So for instance, if you had a 4-plex, you could add 25%, which would be 1, 8 units, 2, so forth and so on. The interesting part about that law is there's no limit on it. If you had a 100-unit building, you could potentially add 25 new units to it under that 25% conversion rule. But that only applies to the conversion of existing non-living space, but that does include parking. So a huge number of our customers are converting tuck under parking into ADU units now, and a lot of them. We have several that are like doing 13 of them on one property. So that's pretty ground changing. Under the SB 9, I want to quickly get in here because there is a potential now, if you do not do the lot split, you can develop SB 9 called the single lot 2-unit development. And under that, you take your property and you can now build 2 units on it. That could be the, divvying up the existing single family home into 2 units, adding to it, divvying it up into 2 units, or knocking it down, building 2 new units. But he can build 2 units on it. Once you've done that, it has to be a 2-part process. Now, because you did that, the city of Los Angeles is going to look at that as being a multifamily property. And because of that, they're going to allow you to develop it with ADUs under the existing multifamily rules, which is you can add 2 by right ones plus a conversion one. So under SB 9, you could actually produce 5 units on that single family property. And because you did not do the lot split part, there is no owner occupancy requirement. So that's
I want to say this right now. You're not reading off a teleprompter. I don't even see you looking at notes. This is all off the top of your head. This is how much you know. This is how the in-depth the knowledge is off of Seth Phillips' head. So tell us about ADU Gold and why.
What I do.
Yeah, tell us about ADU Gold and why everybody needs you if they're attempting or even thinking about doing an ADU.
Well, this is what we specialize in now, as I said, and now the SB 9 opportunity, which is all kind of like ADU on steroids sort of thing. And cool concept of SB 9 is that as a homeowner, and I know this is going to apply many times, there are people that own homes that are never going to sell them. They're planning on owning them until they pass, and then they're going to pass it on to their heirs. So there's, as a real estate agent, there's nothing you could do with that client really, but now there is, because now those people can sell their backyard. They don't have to do any development. They can just do the subdivision process, sell the backyard. Somebody else can develop it. And this is the magic part. In the city of Los Angeles, any legal buildable lot right now, almost virtually anywhere in the city, is worth a minimum of $500,000. Yeah. So there's going to be people cashing in on that. So we can help with whatever part of the process you need. We are officially a consultancy, but 85% of our clients, we handle everything from the beginning to hand them the keys at the end. We architectural, engineering, expediting, construction services, all of it. And whichever part of it that you want, we're there to help people, accomplish this.
Tremendous. Seth, can't thank you enough for joining us today on 30 Minutes with Spyglass Lending. This is Seth Phillips, Mr. ADU of ADU Gold, the consultancy. And I'm telling you, get in touch with this guy. If you're even thinking about doing an ADU, you've had questions about an ADU, you wonder how this all works. This man knows it all, and his firm's incredible. He really has helped a tremendous amount of clients do it right. And as you said, and I'm going to reiterate, 20,000 permits already have been pulled since SB9's been in existence. So many more coming. There's just a lot to be done here, a lot to uncover. So thank you very much for joining us today. Hopefully, we sent some people your way. This was really enlightening. Really appreciate the time. Thanks, Seth.
Thank you, everybody.